Good Monday evening, folks. Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandages here with you on November the 4th, 2024 with a tropical update. We've got a brand new named storm. Tropical Storm Rafael formed in the central Caribbean, and it is now forecast to become a hurricane as it heads towards western portions of Jamaica and eventually western Cuba, and could be a threat to the United States within the next 5 days or so. It's been an active November. 2 named storms so far this month. We had Patty, that was a subtropical storm, and then obtained tropical characteristics and became Tropical Storm Patty in the northern Atlantic that has since dissipated and is now a remnant low. Rafael is the latest, and it is likely to become a hurricane. In fact, forecasts right now put it up to a Category 2 strength as it moves over western Cuba later this week. Now, if it was to maintain hurricane status and become a U.S. landfall, it would be very, very rare for November and only be joined by 4 other storms that have made landfall in the U.S. as hurricanes in the month of November. Most recently was Nicole back in 2022. That was a Category 1, 75-mile-per-hour winds near Vero Beach, Florida. But between then and the last time that happened was 37 years. You got to go all the way back to 1985. For Kate, that made landfall as a Category 2 storm with 100-mile-per-hour winds. And then we go way, way back to 1935 and 1861, all of which were not major hurricanes, thankfully, but it's been a while and it's quite a rare occurrence. So we'll see if this does happen. It is forecast to weaken a bit as it heads towards the Gulf Coast of the United States. But we'll see how things play out there. Things can certainly change in due time. Here's a broad look at the overall basin right now. A lot of convection, a lot of activity out there, but anything that's organized is really held out into the Caribbean. And this is the area we look for late in the season for development. It's here, the Gulf of Mexico, or the Southwest Atlantic off the southeast coast of the United States. So this has produced several storms so far this year. The Caribbean and the Central American gyre has been spitting out systems into the Gulf of Mexico over the past couple of months. But this is the latest. Rafael, here's the stats on it as of the 7 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, 45-mile-per-hour winds, so a low-end tropical storm with gusts up to 60 miles per hour and moving rather slowly to the north-northwest. We'll begin to see this really start to take shape and intensify as it lifts towards the northwest. There's Jamaica, Cayman Islands, and western Cuba here will all be in the crosshairs of Rafael as it builds to the north and west. Switching things up now and showing you what it looks like on visible satellite. Got to go back to when the sun was still up, so earlier this afternoon. And you can see it is certainly starting to get that overall spin and looking more and more like an organizing tropical system heading towards hurricane status in the next couple of days. In terms of any mid-level moisture, we got plenty of it. Dry air is lurking off to the north and west, and that may come into play later on in its lifespan as it enters the central Gulf of Mexico later this week, and it starts to kind of put it on a weakening trend as it builds towards the Gulf Coast of the United States, potentially. But for now, all systems go for this thing to intensify. In fact, maybe even over-intensify or rapidly intensify in the next 48 hours or so. All the ingredients are there. Rather weak wind shear. We've got the mid-level moisture that is plentiful. And of course, we still have the very warm ocean temperatures that right now are around 90 degrees just south of Jamaica and really maintaining that all the way up just to the south of the western portion of Cuba. So plenty of warm water, and in this part of the Caribbean, that warm water extends down to a great depth. So we've got plenty of ocean heat content here that could support a period of rapid intensification. However, once it passes over western Cuba, gets into the Gulf of Mexico, that's when things get a little bit more iffy. So here's the actual forecast track, the latest from the National Hurricane Center, showing a system building to the north and west, passing potentially over far western Jamaica, moving over the Cayman Islands, and then moving over the western portion of Cuba. Notice it is gradually weakening as it does so. It could certainly go through a period of rapid intensification if everything lines up, but right now expected to be 85-mile-per-hour Category 1 as it moves over the Cayman Islands and moving over western Cuba as a Category 2 of 100 miles per hour. Then it builds out into the Gulf of Mexico. And notice that the forecast cone here does get this large bulb at the end, this large lobe. And this is indicative of some uncertainty in the forecast here as we get out in this point in time, because both of our long-range computer models, the GFS and European, kind of diverge in their solutions on where it may head. Here's our first indication of this potentially becoming more apparent. Okay, here's the forecast track, the cone that I just showed you from the National Hurricane Center. And here's a bunch of American tropical models here, all kind of favoring the eastern and northeastern kind of quadrant or half of this forecast. Okay, it's really favoring eastern areas. Then you've also got another group of models. These are favoring more European models that show it diverging and going off to the west and maybe even southwest for a period of time. So this will be very much an interesting thing to watch, because if it stays off to the south, it could hold on to its structure more, not encountering the dry air and increasing wind shear to the north, and maybe have a stronger storm that's heading into the western portions of the Gulf of Mexico and potentially threatening South Texas, possibly, as we get way out in the forecast term. We'll see which one this starts to favor as we get a little bit farther out in time. Here's how it looks. Compare the two global models. The American is in the yellow, the GFS is in the yellow, American, and then the European is in the red. Both pretty good and in agreement here as it heads towards the western portion of Cuba, okay? GFS is a stronger system, European not too far behind. Moves over Cuba, heads into the Gulf of Mexico. Again, both are kind of favoring more of an eastern track here. But you see the GFS is a much stronger system, and then as that builds to the north, it encounters increasing wind shear, and we start to see it begin to weaken. The dry air gets entrained into the system too. That could lead to a weakening scenario for Rafael if it does favor the American. And then you've got the European here diverging, and you see it moving off to the west. And potentially by later this weekend, we could have this system, still looks like to be weakening, building towards possibly South Texas. Again, that's way out. Today's the 4th. That's a look at Sunday, November the 10th. So 6 days out, a lot can change. But certainly there's plenty of warm water still available in the Gulf of Mexico, but there will be increasing wind shear and increasing amounts of dry air. Now, it is November. We are starting to see the season wind down. It goes all the way through November 30th, right? But there's also another area right next to and adjacent to the northeast of where we have Rafael. This is over in the Bahamas and southwestern portions of the Atlantic. This is another tropical wave that's got a low chance of developing right now, with only odds at around 20%. But some of the long-range models do favor some at least gradual development and organizing with this. So we are at the 17th named storm with Rafael. Sarah would be up next if we do in fact see that other tropical wave begin to develop. It's certainly becoming a very active season after the first half was rather quiet, as you know. Well, that's the latest on today's update. If you have any questions, you can find me on social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, X, and on TikTok. I'll see you back here tomorrow.